everybody, and welcome to our next installment of Reflect Ferosh, hanging out with Rabbi Ariana Silverman today from the Downtown Synagogue. It is good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Jeff.
Always love chatting. And today we're going to have a great conversation about what you're thinking about for high holidays and speaking. But before we go there, I got to ask the very first question. What's on your playlist this week? What kind of music is filling you up?
So I'll tell you, I have two albums that I always play when I'm writing sermons. I don't know why, but these are my two. So one is Emmylou Harris's Red Dirt Girl.
Not now.
Oh my God. Her song, The Pearl, that's my starting my sermon song. It's great. I don't know if it works for anybody else, but that's my starting sermon song. And the other one is Yo-Yo Ma's Bach Cello Suites. Again, I don't know why his particular recording, but that's what I need.
This
so
is brilliant.
I know that that's what I need for my sermon writing is those particular two. Although I will admit that I haven't been doing as much sermon writing as I probably should be.
This is why we're chatting.
Yeah, because to say I've been listening to those all week would be more aspirational than the reality. I will say for anyone who's dealing with kids and childcare that the reality is much of what I've listened to this week is Kids Bop renditions of hit songs. Party in the USA by Kids Bop seems to be more in my vocal and oral environment than Emmylou Harris, but we'll change that. We'll change that as we get closer.
Our next question for you is the big one. What is your high holiday sermon about? Or what do you think that maybe your high holiday sermon is going to be about this year? Where's your head at?
So I want to reserve the right to change at the last minute. And I feel like it's almost like this is a teaser and you could be surprised.
Exactly.
When it's different. But here are the things I've been thinking a lot about. One is mental health and the need for all of us to be much more in tune with our own mental health needs and the needs of others around us. I have spoken about this before. It's something that I feel very passionately about. And I think it arises in a different context this year as we've been through a really traumatic communal experience, for some horribly tragic and tremendous loss, and for all of us, I think, challenging the way we understand the world and our relationship to it. And in terms of preparation for that, it is my sincere hope, whether you hear my sermons or come to the Downtown Synagogue or not, that we all are thinking deeply about how to take better care of ourselves and recognizing that mental health issues are real. And we are responsible for caring for our bodies in many different ways. Completely. And caring for others. So how I frame that, I don't yet know, but I know that that is very much on my mind. The other thing I've been thinking about is the upcoming Shemitah year and the challenges. Nobody else in the world, except maybe Chazon, is thinking about the Shemitah year. Maybe that's not fair, but
I got what you're saying.
I actually think, like, so for those who don't know, like the Shemitah year is in the agricultural cycle. You're supposed to take a year in which you give the land the opportunity to rest. So we have a 6-day work week with then Shabbat for us to rest. Or if you're privileged enough to be in a job like the rabbinate or in academia, you get to have 6 years of working and then potentially a sabbatical. The same is true for the lands, for the earth. We need to give it a break. And despite that I have deep environmental roots, I've worked for Chazon, I worked for the Sierra Club, like that is part of who I am and my passion. I've been thinking about Shemitah also because it speaks to that question about rest and self-care. And what does it mean for actually to look deeply at our tradition's understanding of the need for rest and self-care? What does it mean for us to say, there's only so much we can take, and how do we give ourselves a break? And so I haven't quite distilled that yet, sure. But I think it's a really interesting timing for the Shemitah year to be coming, as we've come through a really difficult time in which I think we've worked our bodies and our minds and our souls really, really hard.
I totally feel you, and that resonates a lot. Both the concepts of, mental health and also Shemitah. I want to just dig a little deeper though into mental health and to both of these. I think one of the things that I've started to think about with regards to mental health is that mental health is not just resting. Mental health is not just self-care. And this actually kind of shoots into the next question, really, of like bringing this concept a little bit more down to earth. Are there other resources that you think about or go to that sort of help open up these concepts about what these things are, mental health specifically?
Sure. So I think the first thing I would say is that talking about mental health and mental illness is not just about being sad, right? That mental illness is an illness, and it's when the body is not functioning in the way that we need it to, and that it's just as real as any other physical ailment that people may experience. And I've gone through terrible periods of depression myself, and it's something that I talk about publicly, and recognize very deeply that is a very different thing than having a hard day, right? That there's illness when we talk about mental illness, and that illness is real and it's devastating, and it's something that we need to take very seriously, because we would never overlook or dismiss someone's physical pain if it were visible, right? If someone, God forbid, broke a leg or got cancer, all of these horrible things that of course we want no one to have, that mental illness unfortunately is a invisible disease for a lot of people, and that's part of what makes it so dangerous. Having said that, I do think that there is also the question of mental health in terms of health, right? That what does it mean for us to actually keep our minds and our ability to interact with the world in a healthy and productive way in a healthy frame, right? Like, we do think about what do our bodies eat and how do we exercise and all of those things, but are we thinking about what exhausts me and what really is pulling me away from what's my mission in the world, as opposed to adding to it, right? That there are things that we worry about that we need to survive, and there are things that we worry about that I think decrease our ability to actually move in the world. And there's been a lot to worry about in the last year, and a lot that's been traumatic. And I do think it's very difficult for people of conscience to distinguish what are the things that I need to be actively working toward or against, and what are the things that I have to figure out a way to let go, so that they don't destroy my ability to continue to be the person that I need to be in the world.
Yeah, I think this is important to talk about, because I really do believe that this is a moment where there are many, many people who are getting curious about mental health, maybe for the first time or in a new way for the first time after this last year of being in really strict quarantine. And it's important to, I think, to create a lot of different pathways to enter into this conversation, and not to sort of simplify it into just one way of thinking about it, one thing. I look forward to seeing if or how you connect that to Shmita.
Potentially. I mean, look, I think the other piece is, and this is something I actually do think we need to be worried about, we are in an environmental crisis. Particularly as we think about the next generation of what that's going to look like for them, we are morally responsible in a way that perhaps we haven't owned up to fully for what is happening to our environment and our planet, and need to do something yesterday. We needed to have done something yesterday and today and tomorrow. I was working for the Sierra Club now 20 years ago in their global warming and energy program. And so sometimes I joke that it would have been really much better if I had stopped global warming 20 years ago, because it would have saved us all a lot of time now. But unfortunately, I was not successful at the time.
And I would say for your mental health, it's good not to have all of that on your shoulders.
My shoulders, I failed. But one of the things that I realized, and actually I hadn't made this link before our conversation, is that similar to mental illness, it can be very invisible, right? That we don't see the effects of a lot of our actions, and we don't see all of the damage that's been done. Chazon is doing, actually tonight, although I realize people will be watching this later, a Metro Detroit Shabbat. And one of the things that they put that I really loved is that we don't actually throw trash away, right? It goes somewhere. And part of the challenge is we don't see that somewhere, or the effects of its incineration or whatever it is. And that invisibility is part of what's so destructive, because if we could actually see what we're doing and the effects of our actions, I think we would behave very differently in the world. And so
I could not agree more. I think that my book recommendation, I don't actually usually give book recommendations on this, but in terms of making the invisible more visible, there's the Alan Liu book, This Is Real and You're Incredibly Unprepared, which the whole premise of this book is about there are visible things, there are invisible things. And at least in the course of my experience reading the book a couple of times, it brings my more personal sensibilities about how to be aware of invisible things, emotionally, spiritually, but even just practically.
And the big yes and for me, and I haven't figured this out myself, is that there is a lot that's happening in the world that we can't bring into our consciousness all the time, because there is only so much that we can do. And part of the challenge is that we actually do see what's happening on the other side of the world that we can do nothing about. And that when you see that, it's actually really easy to be distracted by the things that you can't affect, that are visible on your screen when you're, doom scrolling through the New York Times, as I am wont to do. But then not see the things that we can actually affect. And I have a colleague who wrote a beautiful sermon about breaking news, because she said it is literally breaking us.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Right? That actually the breaking news cycle that we're in breaks us down, and that we can't effectively distinguish between what really is something that we can act on in the world and what are the things that are just breaking us.
Yes. I mean, I can tell you personally, I think this also goes back to mental health awareness, and
right.
Because ultimately that will inform or have an effect on our behavior, really. When I was in college, I was always somebody that was afraid to go find the front lines of those fights, because I was always overwhelmed by in the same way you can get really overwhelmed when you really see so far and so true what's happening in the world. And even it's now I'm trying to figure out still how to manage that feeling that I have in avoiding the news, but not how much should I consume or be consuming? What can I really concern myself with? How can I be aware of all of this and feel like I'm not totally helpless in front of it?
When you figure it out, let me know, Jeff.
I will. Okay, let's go to the last question. If I'm a young adult particularly, how can I check out the High Holiday experience at the Downtown Synagogue this year?
Super easy. Just come. So we're going to be having our High Holiday services yet again this year at the Old Temple Bethel, what's now the Bethel Community Transformation Center at 8801 Woodward, through a wonderful partnership that we have with our friends there who've been hosting us for years. The only caveat that I say to that is please do check our website, because as I don't need to say, things are evolving and it may be different than what we're planning now. As of right now, like at this particular minute on this day, the plan is to be in person at 8801 Woodward, and that anyone and everyone is welcome to come. The only way in which that would change is whether we have more of a live stream presence than an in-person presence. We are I should say that. In addition to the in-person, we are going to be live streaming. So if you're more comfortable watching in the comfort of your own home, please feel free to engage with us that way as well. We would love to see you in person or have you watch our live stream.
Thank you so much, Ariana. Really, truly, this is a pleasure.
Thank you, too, Jeff.